Hello everyone and welcome to Top Tips for Archaeology Graduates. Today I am joined by Alex, who is a bioinformatician, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford. Hi Alex, how are you today?
Hello, I'm really good. Yeah, it's bright and lovely outside, so always good. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. So could you tell us a little bit about being a postdoctoral researcher, a bioinformatician, and what that means for you, the kind of things that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in the computational analysis of rare disease genetics. So we work with patient data and look to see if there's any variants in their genome that could impact on the diseases that they suffer from. So day to day, I use computational methods, so that's software that's already available or programs that I write to kind of tease out the information that's sort of waiting there in people's genomes for us to look at. I like to describe it as feeling a bit like giant Sudoku. So if you really like the sort of logic problems and yeah, that it's
Puzzle solving.
it's puzzle solving. It's
Yeah.
exactly that. So if you're really into puzzle solving, then it's the most wonderful thing. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's still digging, but just more metaphorical.
There are connections there with archaeology. So
Yes.
what are some of the things that you enjoy about doing this work?
So mostly it's answering questions. So eventually, we've only just started. The lab that I work in is incredibly new. And so I've not yet got any fantastic results for any patients, but some point down the line the aim is that we'll be able to help people, genuine people, and that is just an incredible thing to see in my future, that's something that we'll be able to do.
Yeah, that's genuinely inspiring, I guess. When you say things like bioinformation, it sounds like you're working at a computer. It doesn't have that connection to the real world, but here is that real world application that comes out at the end. So can I ask about the other side of that? What do you find more challenging about this role?
Sometimes because of the data protection, largely, the information that we use in order to help find these variants is difficult to query and difficult to interact with, which is obviously incredibly understandable. It's supposed to be, because it's very, very, very secure, but that can be very challenging and frustrating, and learning to find new ways to get around issues is probably the largest challenge that I would face on a day-to-day basis. And this is true of many of the tasks, and I think it's true of all academia. Thinking about it doesn't matter what subject you're in and whether you're a coder or whether you're a writer or whether whatever you do, there will always be obstacles, and the challenge is finding creative ways to overcome them.
Yeah, I certainly think that's true of some of my experiences in academia as well. It's problem solving is a really important skill to have, and it can pose particular challenges. So can I ask, how did you go from an archaeology undergraduate degree to working in what seems to me like quite a distant field, and involving quite a lot of technical computing, coding skills?
Yeah, so it is very left field by comparison with what would be considered a normal trajectory. But when I reached my final year, I had a module in ancient DNA, which was just absolutely phenomenal. My main focuses during my undergraduate were the archaeological sciences. That was I was a BSc, and human disease and skeletal remains were big ones. And I did this module in ancient DNA, and Michelle, who was the lecturer, introduced us to the concept of a bioinformatician, and was just like, they're these whiz-bang amazing things that, and I'd never even heard of one prior to this. And did a little bit of digging, and I looked at courses that were available, and thought I could possibly do this. By the time I'd finished my thesis, I'd really dug into into the sort of molecular biology of the disease that I was interested in, and just absolutely loved it and managed to convince them, I think probably based on a very, very lovely letter from my supervisor that I should be taken on. And it was an enormous learning curve. I was not prepared for just the amount of work that was changing discipline, but it was absolutely worth it. And I'm not the only person to have done it now. There are more that have followed since. And one of the students who was 2 years after me at York is now doing her PhD in bioinformatics at Oxford as well. So yeah, it's definitely a path that can be trodden. Yeah.
And I believe that you were a single parent while you were doing your undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
What was that like, if you don't mind me asking?
So really rewarding and both challenging and actually a bit of a relief, which sounds very strange. So I probably, if I'm honest, only went to university in the first place because I felt like I needed to do something for my son. And I mean, I'd been a barmaid for years, and I'd actually worked at an archaeology unit as well. I just didn't see myself as, you know, being a single mum that was sort of teen mum as well to start. People like me don't go to university. It's just not for us. We, you know, do sort of day-to-day jobs and look after our children. So that was something that was quite a revelation, and I expected to fail when I went, and I just thought I really need to at least try. And I had loads of support from around me, from friends who'd gone to university or at university at the time, that were just like, you can and you will. So I relocated without a support network, which was, I wanted to go to York, and nobody in my support network lived in York, but that's where I wanted to go, and I did it. And that was a challenge, particularly in terms of finding schools, etc. But there were lots of people that could support with that, and actually particularly at the university. So the administrative staff and student finance staff at the university were amazing, and really, really helpful. In terms of the workload, managing childcare, luckily my son was primary school age, and so managing the childcare and the work wasn't as difficult as I'd envisioned it being, because he went to bed quite early. Also, when he was learning to read, he would read me my papers, because I'd be really sleepy because I'm dyslexic as well, so it was really a slog. And I would be reading my papers and I'd just be like, oh, no, I've got it. And so he'd sit there next to me on the sofa and read. He read me The Molecule Hunt, which is a book that Matthew Collins, who was one of the previous lecturers, did the foreword for. I've got a little video of him reading me The Molecule Hunt.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's amazing. Yes. Cringe for him now, he's 16, but yeah.
Something you can remind him of at regular intervals, I'm sure.
I'd like to, especially because he plans to go on and do archaeology at York. So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I like to hear it.
Yes, it's amazing.
Like yeah.
But actually the interesting thing about being a single mum while I was doing it was that was really beneficial to me was that I didn't have all the social obligations. When I could get a sitter, which I was very lucky that there were some other amazing mums at the primary school, and so we all used to sort of share duties with child caring. So I had the ability to go and do social involvement stuff with the other students. But actually I didn't feel the pressure that you sometimes can get as a university student to go out and have all the fun and sort of maybe not necessarily focus on your studies. And it meant that my balance was just there without me having to try and force it. So that actually was incredibly beneficial.
That's a really interesting insight. Thank you for sharing that. Can I then go on and focus a little bit more on your degree? What kind of skills do you think that you've got from your degree that still you use today, or you think really matter in choosing a career and following a career path?
So very specific skills that have impacted on my career are, I am an evolutionary biologist. That's the overarching thing that describes my scientific interests. And that was hugely informed by archaeology. And so the fundamentals of evolution were really amazing. And we got a really, really good grounding in it. And whilst we were looking at species evolution, the same concepts apply to molecular evolution and evolution of language, evolution of mobile phones, technological evolution, evolution, just the whole idea of it, as can be applied to lots of different areas, was a really, really thoroughly well covered thing that I've taken away. The other things that have been incredibly useful for me in what I do are the ability to be very critical of what resources I'm using. So I think it's something that isn't necessarily heavily covered in other subjects, but critical thinking and critical analysis of journal articles, including the methods that are used, was an incredible skill that I learned whilst I was in York. And adding to that, the ability to literature review. So I can read large volumes of literature because I've the techniques to do that were given to me, and also finding relevant literature. But yeah, literature reviewing has been crazily important, actually. Really, really excellent. And the ability to be like, I'm starting to read this and it's not relevant to me, I can turf it out, I don't have to read that. Also brilliant.
It's really interesting, actually, those kind of research skills that you say that you picked up as part of your degree. So many people that I've been talking to across a whole range of different areas have really honed in on that being one of the things that they say they use every day. That ability to be able to judge data or judge information from a paper and say, pick out the important things. I think I'm realizing how important it is as I do these interviews with people.
Yeah, and
no
I think
what career they do.
Yeah, and I think archaeology has a unique position with regards to that, and how important it is to archaeology, that means that you do get such a good grounding in it when doing a degree in archaeology, which also probably is contributory to the fact that the career paths are so diverse afterwards, and that's because of the transferable skills and just the sheer quality of those skills that you're learning. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's really, really good.
Well, I certainly agree. Thank you. So maybe the final question that I'd like to ask you is, what advice would you give to graduates who want to follow in your footsteps? Who want to perhaps move from archaeology more into some of the hard sciences, harder sciences?
Okay, so for the harder sciences, I would say that learn to love maths. And in fact, you probably do love maths. Learn to stop pretending you hate maths, because it's the standard thing that people are like, oh, I can't do maths now, I hate it, it's awful. I was the same. I just figured I couldn't do maths. It wasn't my bag. Maths is beautiful. I just hadn't allowed myself to consider that I might like it, because no one likes maths. It's just not done. Yeah. That would be a huge thing. The other one, and I think it applies across the board in whatever you do, that you're an imposter. Accept it. Like, that is just, it's a case that everybody has it. Everybody feels like, I've been given this office and people are going to come to me for advice or for like teaching and things, and someone's going to find out that I don't belong here, and then what's going to happen? And you just like, even like while you're doing your studies, while you're doing your degree, it's such a day-to-day thing that everybody has at the back of their mind and no one ever talks about, that everybody feels like they don't really belong here, and someone's gonna catch them at some point and be like, oh, well, actually that was just a fluke that you did so well in that previous module, you don't really belong here, maybe we should move you to something else. It's horrible, and it is the number one thing that actually stands in the way of doing what you will love in future, because you'll second guess yourselves. And literally everybody that I know, all of the lecturers, all of the postdocs and postgraduates, all of the graduate students, all of the students, everybody is an imposter. They all are absolutely sure that no, but I'm the real imposter though. You clearly obviously belong here. And I'm like, I'm an archaeologist in a bioinformatics world. Do I really belong here? Yes, I do. Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing to hear. Thank you so much for saying that. I think you're absolutely right. Everyone feels it, and it's perhaps not something that we talk a little bit, and you kind of talking to yourself. I think it's really interesting that you say it's the number one thing that stands in your way, and that's kind of like perhaps acknowledging that a little bit and saying, actually, this scares me. It might feel a little bit unsafe or a bit dangerous to be taking these risks, but actually the rewards are really, really quite important, especially to see you talk so enthusiastically about what you get to do now.
Oh man, I absolutely love what I do. And I think the other thing to note about the imposter syndrome is that actually there's a real problem with self-sabotage, that if you're frightened of failing at something, then you will put things in your own path that make you feel like, oh well, that's a reasonable reason to have failed at it, and actually you cause yourself to fail. But being aware of those things that you do, such as the imposter syndrome, and allowing yourself to believe that you're an imposter, will ultimately lead to you not being able to pursue the things that you love. I don't know what I'd be doing now if I wasn't doing what I currently do, but I don't know that I would be anywhere near as happy as I currently am. Yeah.
That's really lovely to hear. There's one last question I wanted to ask you before we finish this interview, and that in the past you've mentioned to me that you faced some mental health challenges while you did your degree, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that as well. We know a lot of our students have mental health challenges as well, and it would be really great to hear from you. I think they'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, so I have bipolar disorder, a specific type called cyclothymia, which means that I rapidly cycle up and down. Luckily, it doesn't generally get to the peaks and troughs that you would normally associate with bipolar disorder, but it can. And one of the major challenges was to actually identify when this was happening and the behaviors that can exacerbate it. And during my degree, so I had periods of hospitalization due to bipolar disorder in the years running up to doing my degree. Actually, I haven't had a single event since starting my undergraduate degree.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Like 10 or 11 years ago. And I think being part of a really, really tight network of people that also feel the pressures, also feel the stress, and also knowing that there are people willing to talk about this. So there were a good number of students in my year who were really, really vocal about their mental health issues and difficulties, and sharing that with each other was really quite important. And then also finding out that there's so many different resources that are available to you, and obviously it doesn't necessarily always work for everyone, but not feeling alone in that is an incredibly powerful thing to feel. And actually now I'm a mental health first aider at work, and have sort of really gone into the background of the support networks, because they are so useful. Actually, one of the major things, which I know wasn't very formal, was I used to just go and chat with the admin staff. I would be like, I'm incredibly stressed today. And they're like, yeah, so am I. And that was amazing. And just having people that have the time of day for you, and that can be so my supervisors, both of my supervisors, Malin Holst and Matthew Collins, were tremendous. I could just be like, I'm really struggling and I need maybe a day or two. And I had a bereavement, which would normally probably have pushed me off the deep end. But I had such incredible support and no pressure. And actually, I ended up doing better than I would have expected, because I wasn't trying to force myself to just basically digging myself into a hole. I had a breather, I had some space, and I was able to re-enter my studies, and it was fantastic, really fantastic. Yeah.
That is so lovely to hear. I think we sometimes underestimate how important students are to supporting each other. I think that's one thing that I'd like to say after what you said, and that I know that our community at King's Manor is really important for that, and seeing the ability of our students to really respond to each other and to support each other is always really lovely to see. But also props to our admin department as well, who are just
I love
fantastic.
Yeah, I had so many ups and downs of various things, which obviously is perfectly understandable. And I think the majority of the time they had such amazing advice, or we're just like, leave this with me, I'll email people. And yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us, for your advice, and also talking through some of the challenges that you faced while you were at university. I think that's going to really be of interest to our students listening. Thank you to you for watching, and then join us again for next time for top tips for archaeology graduates. Thank you.